On October 4, 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite sent into space. This momentous feat sent shockwaves around the world. Nowhere were they felt more than in the United States. Within a year, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, was established. The Cold War was leaving Earth's atmosphere, and the space race was officially on. On April 12, 1961, the Soviet Union took an even more significant step when cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human to go to space and orbit the Earth. The following month, astronaut Alan Shepard became the first American in space, but he did not complete a full orbit. Basically, he went up and came back down. The next Earth orbit would be accomplished by another Soviet cosmonaut, German Titov, who completed 17 orbits.
Godspeed, John Glenn.
Finally, in February 1962, John Glenn became the first American to orbit the Earth, completing 3 trips around our planet. Then, in September of 1962, President John F. Kennedy threw down the gauntlet.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
With these words, Kennedy set a goal that many thought was unrealistic. And indeed, getting a man to the moon was not going to be easy. By this time, launching humans into space was becoming commonplace. But getting a man to the moon was an entirely different type of mission altogether. The Atlas rockets, originally designed for military purposes, were redesigned to send humans into low Earth orbit. They did this by burning up all of their fuel during the launch sequence, so that by the time an astronaut reached space, they could use Earth's gravity to propel the spacecraft. To get to the moon, however, would require a rocket that could carry extra fuel into space for a separate burn that would propel the astronauts from the Earth's orbit to the moon. It is important here to recognize just how far away the moon actually is. We're used to seeing images of the Earth and the moon side by side, but the distance between these two objects in these images couldn't be further from the truth. The moon is approximately 240,000 miles away from the Earth. But what does that actually mean? If we shrink the Earth down to the size of a basketball, at scale, the moon would be slightly smaller than a tennis ball, and it would be roughly 24 feet or 7.3 meters away. At this distance, it takes a spacecraft about 3 days to get to the moon, and another 3 days to get back. So a moonshot was going to require a command and service module with enough oxygen, food, and fuel for 3 people to survive in space for a week and return home safely. The need for such a vehicle resulted in the creation of the Saturn V rocket. At 363 feet long and weighing 6.5 million pounds, the Saturn V rocket was unlike anything ever built. By 1967, with time running out to make Kennedy's goal a reality, success was far from certain. The first flight in the Apollo program, Apollo 1, was scheduled to launch in February of that year. But weeks earlier, tragedy struck when a cabin fire claimed the lives of Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee during a launch rehearsal test. This tragedy set the Apollo program back by 20 months. After the unmanned Apollo 4 and Apollo 6 test launches, it was time for Apollo 8. The Apollo 8 mission was originally just supposed to send its 3 astronauts into orbit and then back to Earth, before subsequent missions would orbit the moon. But with just 13 months until the end of the decade, it was decided that Apollo 8 would leave Earth's orbit and travel around the moon.
We have ignition sequence start. The engines are armed. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have commit. We have liftoff.
On December 21st, 1968, Apollo 8 launched from Kennedy Space Center in Florida, carrying astronauts Frank Borman, James Lovell, and Bill Anders to our nearest celestial neighbor for the first time. Something that seemed like a distant dream just a few decades earlier was now becoming a reality. As each stage of the rocket completed its job, it detached from the rest of the spacecraft until all that remained was the command and service module. Now in orbit, it was time for the astronauts to initiate TLI, or translunar injection, a fuel-burning maneuver that would create enough energy for Apollo 8 to escape the pull of Earth's gravity and reach its destination. After nearly 70 hours of travel in space, Apollo 8 was closing in on the Moon. As they approached, the crew executed the Lunar Orbit Insertion Burn. This maneuver essentially hit the brakes on the lunar module, allowing it to slow down enough to be captured by the Moon's gravity and fall into lunar orbit. Initially, the spacecraft was traveling backwards and upside down relative to the Moon. For the first several orbits, there was no sighting of the Earth. Frank Borman began to right the ship so that it was traveling forward and right side up. And that's when something unplanned and unexpected happened. Beyond the horizon of the Moon, the blue and white image of our planet began to emerge. Tasked with taking pictures of the lunar surface to find an appropriate place for a moon landing, Bill Anders had been given a high-resolution Hasselblad camera for the job. Earlier trips to space had been used to capture images of the Earth, but they were lower-resolution images, and they certainly weren't taken from 250,000 miles away. This was long before digital cameras, so Anders wouldn't know what the photographs looked like until they could be developed back home on Earth. The result was astounding. There it was, our planet. Delicate, fragile, vulnerable, and staggeringly beautiful. Seen in detail like never before. 7 months later, thanks in large part to the daring Apollo 8 mission, Kennedy's goal of landing a man on the Moon by 1970 was achieved. But the enduring legacy of Apollo 8 is surely the Earthrise photo. It was the catalyst for the environmental movement, leading to the annual Earth Day commemorations and the United States Environmental Protection Agency. It transformed our global consciousness, revealing a world without borders, save for one, the thin biosphere-encompassing atmosphere, nourishing and protecting all the life that's ever been known to exist. The competition between nations, the soaring technological achievements, the unflinching bravery and sacrifice, all of it was done with one singular goal in mind: get to the Moon. The irony and impact of the Earthrise photograph is perhaps best summed up by the photographer himself. "We came all this way to explore the Moon," Anders said, "and we discovered the Earth." If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and check out some of my other videos. Thanks for watching.